Thank you, Professor Tu, for introduction. I'm very honored to be here today, and thank you, Charles, invite me to be here. And I consider this to be a very distinguished lecture because I'm talking to the next generation of scientists and the mathematicians and any field for California. So I'll try my best. Today, my topic, as you can see, is I'm going to talk about the schizophrenia. And everyone seems to misunderstand what is schizophrenia. And today, I'd like to let you know what we as a scientists and psychiatrists and geneticists understand what is schizophrenia. So in order for me to communicate with you, I'd like to introduce this from the movie called A Beautiful Mind. And the person in that beautiful mind is played by the actor, and essentially is talking about the Dr. John Hovis Nash. I personally know him, and Nash is born in 1928, and he excelled in mathematics. At the 1958, at age 30, brightest mathematician by Forbes magazine. And however, he began to suffer from schizophrenia at age 30. By that, in that movie, if you had the experience of watching that movie, he started to hear voices when nobody's around. And delusion, believing the communist is trying to get him, even though there is no evidence. And his talk, you remember, is becoming disjointed, and he cannot express his idea clearly. And the behavior seemed to be very erratic. So at that time, he was treated with various kinds of treatment, but finally, the antipsychotic seemed to help him somewhat. And in 1994, he received Nobel Prize on game theory. Essentially, it's the economics. And after that, in 1996, returned to Princeton University in 1996. So through him, today we'd like to talk about what is schizophrenia and what we know now in terms of its genetics and environmental components. Why we are doing this? As a psychiatrist, as a scientist, we like to find out how to prevent them. The finding is very clear that if before the onset, if we can identify some subtle symptoms and treat them, the prognosis is far, far better. And you may know from your friends and with the very brilliant academic history records, and suddenly getting into the college, then began to experience those bizarre feeling and behavior. So I'd like to start off by explain to you what is this term schizophrenia. It might be misnomer, but we are trying to study hard. So essentially, this word schizophrenia was coined by the Swiss psychiatrist. It's schiz meaning splitting, the phrenia meaning mind, and it is still very abstract. So it was coined in 1911 by Swiss psychiatrist Eugen Bleuler to describe splitting or incongruity of thinking, emotion, and behavior. These three are the function of the mind. Still, you don't know what we are talking about. This is all in Dutch, German. And this tend to be confused with some splitting personality. It's different. Splitting personality is a depersonalization. Sometimes in the movie you can see the person today is Debbie, tomorrow become another person, Mary, and could be three. That is not schizophrenia. That is what we call the disorganization of the personality. Today we are not going to talk about that. We concentrate on this. So I like to, for your sake, I like to start off by saying what is the function of the mind. As a psychiatrist and as a scientist, we look at the mind. Mind is invisible. Only through your expression of your thoughts, we know your function of the mind. And the thought is also cannot be perceived only through your speech, your talking, whether it's a logical, whether it's a incoherent. We know your thinking process. Then the second one, we look into your feeling. Your feeling, how do you feel? High, low, sad, and your feeling, or no feeling. So when we examine a person, we look into the function of mind. Another dimension is how this person behaves. So these three are very well balanced. It's the function of the mind is congruent according to what one thinks, then behave accordingly and feel according to one's thoughts. So these are function of the mind, three dimensions of the function of the mind. So that is what Broider, when defined the term schizophrenia, is called splitting of these three functions of the mind. So what does he mean? My interpretation, I visited his institution, and what he means is that something happened, either psychologically or either biologically, genetically, make this person, these three functions of the mind seem to split. That is what the original person, Broider, talking about. By splitting meaning, when the person thinking something sad, yet emotionally no feeling, and behave like he is not sad. So these three functions of the mind seem to be disintegrated. Is meaning we use the word incongruous. So when we see a patient, we essentially assess this three dimension of the mind and see if this person is integrated. Most of the person you talk to, these three are very coherent, but something happened to a person who essentially have a splitting of this three dimension of mind. And that is what we are studying. What is this something? And we still have not solved the problem yet. And it is for you to solve the problem. So I just give you the hint of what we have accomplished up to this time. I have been doing this for many, many years. And I would like to share with you the summary of what we found, and then give you some direction for your future. Believe me, your responsibility is to solve this mystery. But we are getting there with the modern genetics. In the past, as the Bible says, is the control by demon. And in the superstitious era, we consider this to be the curse from deity or curse from the devil. But now gradually we know it is not the curse, it is the underlying genetics and the environmental, biological factors causing this splitting. So today I don't have enough time, but I'll give you step by step. Hope you understand. And I'll leave you some time for you to ask the question if I don't give you the clear picture of what we already know. So essentially what we know for a long time is that we have done the family studies. And it's very important to, even we don't know what is schizophrenia's real causes, we know that in the biological, remember, it is blood relatives of schizophrenia tend to have a higher incidence of schizophrenia comparing with that of the general population, and also some other psychoses, and also some other related illness. So this is the finding for a long, long time, and we did a lot of studies to confirm that. The second is if it's familial. Familial doesn't mean it's genetics. Could be environment, could be some infection, could be some genetic factors. So in order to tease apart whether this is genetics or environment or a combination of both, what we usually do is to study twins. And twins has two kinds of twins. One is identical twins. Another one is fraternal twins, as you know. So we study by studying one twin who is schizophrenic, and how about these persons, co-twins, what is the probability of that co-twin becoming schizophrenic? So, and then compare with fraternal. Fraternal twin meaning they have a different genetic makeup. Identical twin currently, as we know, share 100% gene in common. The fraternal twins share only a half, 50% of gene in common. So by comparing the two, what we call concordance, meaning one twin suffering from schizophrenia, another, the co-twin also suffering from schizophrenia, is called concordance for schizophrenia. So by comparing these two, the identical twins concordance is usually much, much higher than those of the fraternal twins. This indicates there must be some genetic factors. Today, if you are interested in mathematics, we know how to really look into that. But today, I'd like you to remember the identical twins concordance rate is probably around 50% on average. There are some family with identical twins concordance rate may be 80%. Then the fraternal twin dizygotic meaning two eggs. Identical twin called monozygotics, meaning one egg split into two. So by comparing this, we know it is not 100% concordance. If it's the entirely due to genetic, it should be 100% concordance. But this is the only on the average of 50%. This means that there must be some other non-genetic factors influencing the occurrence of what we call schizophrenia. But with more mathematical calculation, we can safely say probably underlying factors, genetics may contribute to approximately 70%. And the another 30% we are now looking into is probably what we call non-genetic. Non-genetic does not mean it's psychological. Non-genetic meaning anything, including biological environment within the uterus when one is conceived, or after delivery, there may be lots of the environmental biological factors and psychosocial factors too. So, but the one thing which there's a lot of debate, this type of study may have some erroneous result. So what really makes things work is that essentially from this country and most of those studies called adoptee studies from a Scandinavian country, from Denmark, they have a registration of all the adoptees, and they still know their biological parents and adoptive parents. So by comparing the adopted relatives, schizophrenic person, before onset of schizophrenia, adopted out, and then comparing the schizophrenia onset incidence with the adoptive relatives, they seem to be adopted into one family. That adoptee suffering from schizophrenia, as a matter of fact, the adoptee's relatives, not biological relatives, seem to not have an increased incidence of schizophrenia. It is the biological parents, families, even though this adoptee adopted out becomes schizophrenia, looking into their biological relatives, apparently their incidence of schizophrenia is higher. So this means that even though there is no frequent contact with biological parents and continuous contact with the adoptive relatives, the study showing that always it's the biological relatives' incidence of schizophrenia seem to be higher than those of adoptive relatives. But one thing which is very important is these biological children of non-schizophrenics are not greater risk for schizophrenia when raised by schizophrenic adoptive parents. This is very important, meaning that the children of non-schizophrenic, when they are raised by schizophrenia in the adoptive families, happen to be schizophrenia, but their risk for becoming schizophrenia is not greater. So this theory of the environmental influence, in the past it is mother to be blamed. Once upon a time, treatment of schizophrenia is that because mother is noxious, so let mother not to come to see patient. Because of mother's raising factors seem to affect the development of schizophrenia. At that time, we don't know. Before this study been done. So now it's quite, I can say in conclusion, at this time, we say there are definitely genetic factors in the development of schizophrenia. From these 3 studies, there are many other studies. It's a little bit complicated, but I was told by Professor Tu that you are all very bright. And so I don't need to go into too detail. And you already digest, and some of you must already read or see those kind of studies. Okay, with this in mind, let us move into another 30% of the factors which we talk about. So environmental, in the past, environmental always meaning psychological. It is not necessary. Yes, psychological is important, and I'm talking about the risk factors. It is not necessary with these factors one becomes schizophrenic. These factors are in our terminology called risk potentially may be related to the onset of schizophrenia. So we have studied the children during their fetus status before delivery and looking into their pregnancy complications such as drug abuse, trauma, or infection. We study these kids and mothers during the pregnancy. If there are higher viral infection or opportunities, then these kids, when we follow them up for 30, 50 years later, their probability of developing schizophrenia by comparing with those without a viral infection seem to be higher. And we actually published this a lot. Another possibility is during the pregnancy, as you know, probably in your biology lecture, the emotion, hypothalamus, and the adrenal cortex and pituitary, all these are related in this axis to stimulate if under stress. These hormone may strengthen or precipitate the onset of schizophrenia on those who are genetically liable to develop schizophrenia. So these are the studies we personally publish, and the many centers in the world also publish. Now I'd like to move into more complicated situation. This, as you are looking into, why we are studying those. We like to prevent them. We like to identify them early enough so that we can essentially, so at Harvard, I have studied particularly those who are the family members of schizophrenia and no symptom yet. And also there are some milder symptoms. These are important. Before they were clinically given the diagnosis of schizophrenia, this is very important for us to currently our concentration is on this area. And you may already know what the phenocopy meaning. These are the small circle given by the current clinician called after examination, called this person is schizophrenic. But yet, there are some who are not genetically related to schizophrenia may manifest schizophrenic-like psychosis, and those are taking amphetamine, taking other street drugs. Then LSD, acid may become psychotic, like schizophrenia. So when we are studying genetics, we call this part is called phenocopies. And what really, with a genetic background, in this bigger circle is called clinical phenotype. So essentially, what we are trying to find is how to find this early, and particularly those who are without clear-cut schizophrenic symptom. We like to identify what in general we call milder or subclinical symptoms, and to see how we can prevent them before the onset. Of course, genotype, genetic makeup, and the environmental interaction result into this. This is a model which we are working on. And then we are surprised to find that in the relatives of schizophrenia, even though they are not schizophrenic, we use the neuropsychological testing, cognitive testing on their or memory, their verbal or mental control, we find that their cognitive deficit in schizophrenia relatives is very, very significantly different from the normal. But in the relatives who are not given diagnosis of schizophrenia, yet they also have milder cognitive deficit. And this now been supported by, we examine the schizophrenia comparing with relatives of schizophrenia, and their neuroimaging seem to show very similar finding in those areas which is very important for the memory, for the cerebellum balance of movement, and then the thalamus, which is very important in terms of sensory function. Those comparing with schizophrenia patients and their relatives, we already found that even though these relatives are not schizophrenic, we can find in the brain or with a cognitive test, they are already show some deficit. So the difference is only in the cortex. In the cortex, which is the more of involving the judgment, involving the learning ability, those type of cortical function seem to be not as much significantly affected like in the case of schizophrenia. So we are now studying the function. This is structural. Now moving into function, and we test when they are given the work to do, where the brain's function actually lighten up. So we are comparing those. So it is quite clear that the diagnosis of schizophrenia is only on those who manifest clinical symptoms. And the diagnosis is given by a clinician. But their relative, even though they are not schizophrenia, I'm talking about biological first-degree relative. First degree meaning brothers, sisters, children, parents. This is called first degree. I seem to already have. So the diagnosis of schizophrenia is not necessarily indicating biological deficit already present in schizophrenia, but in the relatives too. Okay, next is that I'd like to give you some of the study done at Harvard. Is that this is essentially using the mouse model to understand the brain development. So in the normal mouse, essentially this nerve cell, neuron, move up. It's called neuronal migration from the mouse. Then those young cells, they are important for the society too. Young people are very, very important. Move up to the top. So these young cells move to the top is cortex, which is very important in controlling persons' judgment, control persons' thinking, all those in the cortical area. And these are by relatively young cells. So it's very interesting to know that this neural migration is so important. This red one indicated in this cartoon has to move from the bottom up. And if some of these older cells block their movement, this older cell would commit suicide, essentially declare death to leave the way for this young cell to move up. It's very interesting. You observe your parents. They sacrifice for you to move up. to get to this point. However, this neuronal migration is controlled. I'm just using, it's more complicated than this. It's for today's talk. I give you, if this P35 gene is knocked out, then these will not move to the top. So likewise, it's now been hypothesized that in schizophrenia, there must be something happen for those neural migration to move up integration of the cortex and subcortex and others to be disturbed. So we can say in a term which for you to easily understand is the brain connection of the cell is malwired. Engineer, then you know more. So that the cell, and this is very complicated. I just like to tell you what is the current understanding. So in schizophrenia, probably because, or this is just a knock out of one gene. Could be many genes, could be infection, could be some trauma during the pregnancy, drugs influence affecting these neural migration. This now become very important for us to really looking into. So today, I'd like to finish here, then move into other more important clinical implication. This is just the hypothesis. And for you people who are interested in continuing to do either basic research, and we learned from basic research, the clinician, there should be a translation to apply to a clinical setting. And clinical finding could be utilized for the basic science to use to develop new ideas for research. Okay, next. Another one, which before the onset of schizophrenia, we already know some persons, their personality seem to be different. They tend to not talk too much, but they are not psychosis, and they tend to have cognitive mild deficit. So we call this, we developed the criteria and call this the schizotaxia. Before the development of the schizophrenia, their personality seem to be different. And among the family, you can observe those in some of the families. So this is, again, like you to know that before the development of schizophrenia as a psychosis, without psychosis, they may manifest some cognitive deficit and negative symptom, meaning these should be present, but it's absent. It's negative, meaning the normal functioning of the feeling are not there. So apathy, so blunted emotional expression, so no proper communication. So this is what we call negative symptom. And the positive symptom, meaning it should not be there, but they are there, is a delusion. Believing something is there, like in the case of which I show you, or hallucination, voice should not be there, but present. It's called positive, negative. We use this. And the psychosis, always with positive symptoms. And this personality type of the deficit tend to have negative symptoms. And we actually study them, visit their family and talk to those. And the parents can tell you who are suffering from some personality deficit. So we are now studying those, and from genetics, environmental point of view. So just to summarize, in terms of the personality of schizotaxia, essentially, there's a genetic predisposition and environmental factors with the schizotaxia, then develop into schizophrenia and other related conditions. So these are the current thinking. Is not as clear-cut as this, just for today's talk. Now, So I talk about the personality. Personality is a stable condition, difficult to change. Habitual pattern, when you talk about the personality, it's all talking about the personality trait. So next, which we are now conducting with the A centers in the nation, is looking into those persons who are not psychotic yet, but their parents and families, or he or the person himself may feel, I'm somewhat different. So this we call prodromes. Before the onset of schizophrenia, it's called prodromes. Now there are A centers. When I was at Harvard, we developed the center, and the A centers combined together to study all the cases with prodromes and to see when the prodrome started. So now we have these A centers, and the UCSD is one of them, and we get together and we study them to follow these prodromes with the family studies, with the neurocognitive deficit studies, with the neuroimaging studies, and we follow them to see when this prodrome subject become psychotic. And my current responsibility for this is that before the onset, we collect the DNA and their RNA, and all sent to UCSD, particularly RNA, and we like to collect those blood at the time of psychosis onset, and to compare them to see which gene actually upregulated, which gene downregulated. So we will be able to know which gene actually affect the onset of psychosis. So essentially, this is the scheme of, for psychosis, we have a particular rating scale for the delusion, and this is the psychosis threshold. In the case of we use the structural interview form to review those prodromes. Essentially, they have already have a milder surpassing the threshold of psychosis. So I have already talked, yes, about 5 minutes. Okay, I'll be very quick. As a professor, it should be able to summarize within 5 minutes. It is very important. Now we come to the area which you all understand, the DNA, RNA, and then the protein. So we study them, and in the beginning we thought that it is only one gene, but now we know many, many genes are involved. In most of the chromosomes, we now know they are susceptibility gene. And we now moving into not just the genetics, moving into genomics, meaning we not just open one window, open the entire window and looking into the entire gene of the organism. And we found that in the blood, which we are trying to identify them, we found that some gene comparing with the brain upregulated, downregulated. We are now studying this selenium binding protein, which is the both upregulated in brain and blood. And we like to utilize this as a biomarker before the onset of illness to predict their illness. So the future for you is not just on the RNA. We need to move into protein and also studying other type of multiple protein is called proteomics. You already heard that. Then next is the metabolomics, studying small molecules. So moving to the conclusion is that why we are doing this is the prevention of schizophrenia. And traditionally, we use the terminology which you may hear, primary, secondary, and tertiary. But for the prevention, in order to primary prevention, you have to already find the etiology or biological kind. But many of the illness we still don't know. So the way to do it is to divide into universal. Like all of us need a universal prevention by controlling our diet, by exercise, taking care of your physical and mental condition. This is applied not just to schizophrenia, but to all of us. However, second one is selective. Selective for particular age group, particular sex, particular occupation, we need to pay attention to. And the indicated one is already have some mild symptom, like now doctors treat person with a milder hypertension and already treat them. This is indicated, or glucose, a little bit higher than usual, start to pay attention to. So I like to conclude by saying, because Charles asked me to stop, so I'll quickly finish this and leave time, okay? So essentially, summarize what I have said is for schizophrenia, we know genetic predisposition, and then early intrauterine or after delivery, environmental insults on various factors, which precipitate what I call premorbid personality, manifesting neuropsychological cognitive deficit and social interaction or impairment, and then later development after delivery may develop what we call prodromes, which I explained, and then with the onset of schizophrenia, symptom of psychosis. Then if this leave, like in the past, to confine in a state hospital, chronic institutionalization, then this may affect to become chronic schizophrenic. We hypothesize this may be due to in the schizophrenia there is no nerve cell degeneration like Alzheimer, like a Parkinson. But if chronically develop in schizophrenic state, this may toxic effect. So we hypothesize we need to treat the person as early as possible to identify them as early as possible from various factors. So I finished.
Well, thank you very much for a very fascinating talk. You know, we all have beautiful minds, so let's hope we don't have schizophrenia. So now we have time for a couple of questions. Yeah. Yeah.
Who had a question?
You were saying earlier that you guys did mice studies where you knocked out one of the mice by turning off the P-certified gene. Yeah. Exactly what protein does this gene produce, and what is the function of this protein?
The function of this protein is essentially to help the migration of the cells to the moving up or moving to the right place. There are many functions of P35, as you know, in cancer, in others. But for this one, probably we speculate that why knock out the P35? Maybe this may be related to neural migration. And you can continue to study them. There are other many genes which we know.
Hi, good morning. I was really impressed with the study of the genes that would turn on, that would predispose schizophrenia symptoms. And then in that same data table, you had some genes that would turn off, that would prevent or inhibit schizophrenia episodes. Does that lend itself to potential for gene therapy?
Not yet at this time. So I thank you for bringing this up. In medicine, we are only studying those who are already ill. But the paradigm seems to shift for the future is to study those who are well and to how to maintain their wellness throughout their life. This is the most important one for you to really concentrate on. We are educated to only pay attention to sickness because that is the only where the government, National Institute of Health, grants you to study pathological gene. But we are now turned into, we know there are many genes who protect you not to become cancerous. There are many genes protect you to not suffering from heart attack. So what we are trying to study now for the next decade is to find what are those genes which actually promote our wellness, and then they identify them. But talking about gene therapy, which is very complicated, is in the not near future, is in the remote future. That is my thinking. But studying the wellness gene and how to maintain the longevity with good health, this is more. Have the longevity is not necessarily happiness. Longevity with a lot of chronic illness is not good. So longevity, long survival, with good health. And with good health, we, at Boston, we study those person above age 100. What they are in common is that they are happy and they like to help others, do community service, and optimistic, aside from physical condition. So thank you for, I don't have time to elaborate this. This is another talk. Thank you.
Okay, one last question.
You said that people have genetic predisposition to advancing to schizophrenia and that it has to be triggered by the environmental factors. Are the factors the same for every person with the disposition, or are they, what can trigger it? Are they different for individual people?
Different. I'm just for the lecture's sake, I'm talking about the particular aspect, but each person is different.
Okay, let's thank Professor Tsuang.
Thank you. I got this. What is this?
Water bottle.
Water bottle. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.